Hey guys, what's up? It's Alex Nosnos here, and this video is going to be the ultimate PVM and DPS guide, featuring gear upgrades, talking about the best invention perks, auras, free gear upgrades, pocket slot items, tons of different stuff relating to PVM and increasing your DPS. And basically, I've made a ton of different DPS videos before, and I always get people asking me, did you make a video on this? Did you make a video on that? And I thought I would edit, condense, update, and combine basically everything I've made into one video that can be your one-stop guide for all things PVM and increasing your DPS. This guide is going to talk about familiars, switching to full manual combat from Revolution, gear upgrades, pocket slot items, Bakriminel Bolts, tons of stuff. And if you look in the description, you'll be able to see a full glossary of every section and skip to exactly what you need. So make sure to consult the description to see everything in this guide, and let's get into it. Now we are going to talk about the budget perks for armor, and these are for more of entry-level PVMers. So for your top, you'll want the combination of Relentless 3 and Crackling 4, although some people are fine with just Crackling 4. You'll also want Biting 3 as your second perk slot. As for your bottoms, you'll want Impatient 4 and then Enhanced Devoted 4. So first we are going to look at how to get your top perked out. Alright, so the first combination you'll want for your top is Crackling 4 and Relentless 3. Now Crackling 4 is a perk that damages the player's target every 60 seconds for 50% ability damage per rank in PVM, which is a huge deal for dealing passive damage. Relentless, on the other hand, is a perk that has a chance to prevent adrenaline from being consumed while using thresholds and ultimate abilities. This means with Relentless 3, there is a 3.3% chance if you use something like Death Swiftness, you will not use any adrenaline, which can be a massive DPS boost in PVM. So to get these perks, you will need level 90 for Invention. You'll need to use 4 vintage components and 3 explosive components. Now the vintage components can be bought off the GE, and the explosive components can be gotten by disassembling hand cannons. At level 94 Invention, while using a Super Invention Potion, you have a 3.776 chance of getting this combination. But you'll have up to a 32% chance at level 120 Invention. However, just getting Crackling 4 is a 47% chance at level 94 Invention, and if you don't get lucky or don't want to spend the money for Relentless 3 Crackling 4, just getting Crackling 4 will work fine. This will cost you around 450k per attempt, or around 1 mil if you go just for Crackling 4, or on average 8 million if you go for the full combo at the lowest invention level possible, which is 94. Of course, if you have a higher invention level like 110, 120, you can get this for much cheaper. Moving on, the next perk we are going to be wanting to get is Biting 3 for your top. Now this perk is amazing, and it's a perk that has a 2% chance per rank to force each ability and auto attack to become a critical hit. With Biting 3, you will have an average hit increase of 3.8%, which is absolutely massive for a budget perk. You will need level 85 Invention for the Ancient Gizmos to be able to attempt for this perk, and you will need to use 9 direct components in your gizmo. You can get these components pretty fast by disassembling things like Blunt Salvage or Elder Rune pickaxes for around 75k for each component. At level 85 Invention, you have a 4.8% chance to get just Biting 3. This means each attempt will cost you around 675k or 14 million GP on average to get this perk, which is well worth it. Now we're going to move on to your legs, and the first perk we will talk about is Impatient 4. Impatient is an invention perk that has a chance to add 3% extra adrenaline while using basic abilities. Since basic abilities usually gain 8% adrenaline, Impatient will increase that to 11% when activated. This also stacks with the Fury of the Small Archaeology relic to become an even more overpowered combination. To get Impatient 4, you will need to use 6 Zeros components and 1 Zamorak component. Zeros components can be obtained by disassembling Virtus wands and books to get them the most cost-effective way, and average a cost of around 400k each. While Zamorak components can be obtained by disassembling the Zamorakian Molinier for an average price of 352k each. Now, getting Impatient 4 is an 80% chance at level 85 invention while using a super invention potion, all the way up to a 94% chance at level 120 invention. This means you should likely get this perk in one attempt, but maybe two if you're unlucky. In total, you are looking at an average cost of 2 to 4 million GP to get this perk. Moving on to the final perk for your legs, it is Enhanced Devoted 4, which Enhanced Devoted is an invention perk that has a chance on each hit of replicating the Devotion ability for 3 seconds, which will cause protection and deflection prayers to reduce damage from the appropriate style to 1. The activation chance at rank 4 is 18%, which makes this a great defensive perk for absorbing damage passively. To get this perk, it will require level 85 invention for the ancient gizmos, and it requires 8 faceted components per attempt. Now, the cheapest way to get faceted components is by disassembling empty light orbs or batwing and imp-hide items. This has an average cost of around 30 to 40k each, which means each attempt should cost you around 240k. At level 85 invention, using a super invention potion, your odds of getting this perk are 27.5%, or around 4 attempts for a total cost of 1 million GP, which is quite cheap for such a good perk. Alright guys, so now we're going to look at the optimal armor perks. So for your body armor, you're going to want Relentless 5, Crackling 4 combination. And then for the second slot in your body, you'll want Biting 4 and some secondary perk. Mobile, Dragon Slayer, Demon Slayer, and Venom Blood are all examples of a second perk you could try to go for along with Biting 4. Although usually it's expensive to go for these, so you'll usually just take what you can get. As for your legs, you'll want Devoted 4 and Impatient 4 in the first slot. Then you'll want Invigorating 4 and some secondary perk in your second slot. Alright, so now let's get right into the body armor perks, starting with the first combination. So for your body armor, the first combination you'll want is Relentless 5 and Crackling 4. To get this combination, you'll need level 94 invention and you'll need 8 vintage components. This perk is just like the combo we talked about earlier, but more powerful. Since these are advanced perks, we will be computing all the odds of getting these with level 120 invention, since that is theoretically when you should start going for these, as it is way more cost effective. It will cost you around 1 million GP per attempt using vintage components, which can easily be bought on the GE. At level 120 invention with extreme invention boost, you are looking at a 4.9% chance of getting this combo, which means it will take you around 20 attempts on average, with an average cost of 20 mil for this combo. Now we will be moving on to getting Biting 4 plus some secondary perk for your top. So to get Biting 4, you'll need to use 7 Noxious components, 1 Dexterous component, and 1 Subtle component. These Dexterous and Subtle components can easily be gotten through disassembly. I'll link those in the description. As for Noxious components, these are fairly expensive. They are gotten by disassembling noxious weapons like staves and longbows. If the most cost-effective methods are used, these will cost around 8 million GP each, meaning around 55 to 60 million GP per attempt. Now, the odds of getting Biting 4 at level 120 invention with extreme invention potions is around 63% to get some combo of Biting 4. This means on average it'll cost you around 100 mil to get Biting 4, and if you want to specifically go for Biting 4 plus mobile, it'll cost you on average 180 mil to get that combination. Next, we will be moving on to the optimal leg slot perks. First, we will be talking about Devoted 4 and Impatient 4. Devoted is an invention perk that each hit has a chance of replicating the devotion ability for 3 seconds, like Enhanced Devoted, but not as good. But the difference is we'll be pairing this perk in the same slot with Impatient 4, which Impatient 4, as we talked about before, is an invention perk that has a chance to add 3% extra adrenaline while using basic abilities. Now for this combination, you'll need 7 Zamrock components and 2 Saradomin components. These can be easily obtained by disassembling Zamrock and Saradomin Moliniers like I mentioned before. On average, each attempt is going to cost you 2.5 mil at level 120 invention, and with the extreme invention boost, you have a 9.45% chance of getting this combination, which means on average it'll cost you around 25 million GP to get this perk combo. Finally, moving on, we have Invigorating plus Mobile. Now, alternatively, you can put any perk you want in the second slot, but I find Mobile is the best since it's easier to get than trying to get it on your top with Biting. Now, Invigorating is a perk that provides increased adrenaline gain with auto attacks. This is really good and adds up a lot when PVMing. So to get this combination, you'll need to use 6 culinary components, 1 oceanic component, 1 subtle component, and 1 dexterous component. Like I said before, dexterous and subtle components are easy to get and will be linked in the description, while oceanic components can be received by disassembling Sea Singer's gear, and culinary components can be received by disassembling a bunch of random items from the Recipe for Disaster store like kitchen knives, cleavers, sporks, etc. At level 120 invention, your odds of getting this combo are 25.6% and will cost you a total of about 1 to 2 mil per attempt depending on how you get your oceanic components. This means you'll be paying an average of 2 to 4 million GP for this combination, which is really quite cheap considering what you're getting. I want to mention that alternatively, you can go for something like Impatient 4 and Enhanced Devoted 4 instead on your legs. We talked about both these perks previously in the video, and they would provide a more balanced defensive approach and would basically replace Invigorating 4 adrenaline gain with something like Enhanced Devoted. So those are the optimal armor perks, but I thought I'd mention a few things regarding shields. Yes, your shield should and can be perked out, and it's semi-cheap to do so. You'll want to go for the Turdling 4 perk on your shield, which basically Turdling is a perk that increases the duration and cooldown of Barricade by 10% per rank. So for instance, without Turdling, your Barricade will last 10.2 seconds. With Turdling 4, it will last 13.8 seconds, which can totally save your life. This can also be stacked with the Malitop's Farm Totem effect to potentially reach 17.4 seconds of Barricade. So to get Turdling 4, you'll need to use 6 Historic components and 3 Evasive components. And to get any Turdling 4 combo, it's a 42% chance with level 120 Invention with Extreme Potions. And this should end up only costing you around 2 to 300k to get this perk, which makes it insanely good to have on all your shields. The absolute best perks that are a great budget option are the perks Precise 6 and Equilibrium 4. These 2 perks alone together will increase your DPS by 7.1% compared to having no perks. So firstly, we are going to start by talking about Precise 6. Now Precise is an invention perk that increases the minimum hit of abilities and auto attacks by a percentage of its max hit, which makes it insanely powerful. To get Precise 6, you will need to put 9 historic components in your ancient weapon gizmo. You can also use an invention potion to boost your level to make the odds of getting this perk cheaper. However, it shouldn't be that costly in the first place. The odds of getting Precise 6 at level 85 invention with no boosts at all is 10.6%, which means it should take you around 9 tries to get this. This totals out to a cost at around 80 historic components, which currently is only going for around 800k if you buy the crates. That is super good considering how good this perk is, and if you're using a 2H weapon, you'll want to put this perk in there. Otherwise, if you're dual wielding, you'll want to put this perk in your main hand. Of course, this works for all styles, range, mage, and melee. Moving on, we are going to be talking about the second budget perk you'll want to use. This will go in the second slot of your two-handed weapon or on your offhand weapon, and that perk is Equilibrium 4. Now, Equilibrium is an invention perk that increases the minimum hit, but also lowers the maximum hit. This couples well with Precise and is super good as a budget perk. To get Equilibrium 4, you will need 8 Time-Worn components. Now, these components are unlocked at level 103 Invention and can be bought off the Grand Exchange in the form of component crates. Now at level 103 Invention, which is a level required to use these components, getting Equilibrium 4 is a 95% chance, so more than likely you're going to get this perk with only one attempt. On average, this will cost you around 400k worth of Time-Worn components, and again, it's just super cheap. Alright, so now we are going to talk about the optimal perks for PvM. Now these perks are much more expensive than the ones we previously talked about, but will provide an even bigger DPS boost for higher level PvMers. Now the first thing we will go over is for a two-handed weapon. So the first combination we're going to look at for your two-handed weapon is Precise 6 and Ruthless 1. Now, not only will you get the boost from Precise 6 like we talked about earlier, but you'll also have Ruthless 1. Ruthless is an invention perk that increases damage output by 0.5% per rank for 20 seconds whenever an enemy is killed. This will give you even more damage along with Precise 6. So, to get this first combination, you'll need to use 7 Armadillo components, which are gotten by disassembling Armadillo items. You'll also want 2 Time-Worn components. At level 103 Invention, with an Extreme Invention Potion, you're looking at a 40% chance to get this combination, and up to 56% chance at level 120 Invention. On average, this perk is going to cost you around 20 to 30 mil, depending on how you get your Armadillo components. Now, in the second slot of your two-hand weapon, we are going to be looking at the combination of Aftershock 4 and Equilibrium 2. Now, this is by far one of the most expensive perk combinations, but it's absolutely amazing. So along with Equilibrium 2, you will get Aftershock 4, which Aftershock is a perk that deals AoE damage for every 50,000 damage a player deals. The damage dealt at rank 4 is around 120%. This is basically a passive damage every time you deal damage. So every time you would deal 50k damage to an enemy, you're going to get an Aftershock hit that will deal even more damage. This is an amazing perk, and coupled with Equilibrium 2, it's even better. So for this perk, you're going to need Illajunking components, which are received from disassembling items like the Dragon Rider Lance or Zeros Animacore Armor. It will be fairly expensive. You'll need 6 of the Illajunking components and 3 Time-Worn components. It will end up costing you an average of 8.6 million GP per Illajunking component, or 52 million GP per attempt. So at level 120 Invention, with an Extreme Potion, you have a 30% chance of getting this combination successfully. This means that on average, you're going to spend a little over 165 mil to get this perk combination. Now this is definitely an endgame perk, but it's absolutely amazing for PvM. So in conclusion, for a two-hand weapon, you'll want Precise 6 and Ruthless 1, and then you'll want Aftershock 4 and Equilibrium 2. And this will on average cost you around 200 mil to get both of these combinations. Now for dual wield, it's a little bit different, but generally similar. So for dual wield, you'll want Aftershock 4 and Equilibrium 2, like we talked about previously, and you'll want to put that on your offhand weapon. Now on your main hand, you'll want Precise 6 and Aftershock 1. You'll be having Aftershock 1 replace the Ruthless one from the 2H weapon. That'll be the only difference for these combinations. Now the reason for this difference is Aftershock will lose its damage stacks if you remove your weapon that has Aftershock. This means if you're dual wielding and put on a shield, you will lose all your stacks. But putting Aftershock 1 on your main weapon will make it so when you equip a shield, you will still keep your Aftershock stacks. To get Precise 6 Aftershock 1, you will need 7 Armadillo components and 2 Illajunction components. This will average around 45 million GP cost per attempt. At level 120 Invention, with Extreme Inventions, it is a 59.53% chance to get this perk, thus making the average cost at around 80 million GP. So the first familiar we're going to talk about is the classic Beast of Burden familiars. Now, the most popular Beast of Burden familiars are the War Tortoise familiar, which requires level 67 summoning and can hold 18 items for you, such as food or potions. On the other hand, by far the most popular Beast of Burden familiar is the Pakyak, requiring level 96 summoning and can hold up to 30 items for a player, which is basically like a whole extra inventory. It also has the Winter Storage Scroll special attack, which can transfer items to your bank for you. Most players aim for and use the Pakyak for high level PvM because of its ability to provide tons of extra food during PvM encounters. However, we are going to go through the pros and the cons of the Pakyak and War Tortoise. So the pros are, well, you can carry more food and it will allow you to last longer at certain bosses. It's really good for learning. But that's about as far as the pros go. In terms of cons, you are going to be spending more money on food, and you don't get the benefits that a non-Beast of Burden familiar offers, such as something like a Ripper Demon. Now, we all know in Runescape, DPS is king, and the Pakyak and War Tortoise do nothing to increase your damage or boss kill times. Now, the scenarios I'd recommend a Pakyak in is at places that you absolutely cannot survive without food yet. It's a great familiar though for learning bosses, and it can help you get the mechanics of a boss down without worrying so much about running out of food. However, most people stop here and they just continue to use the Pakyak at most PvM scenarios and never switch, and they kind of become reliant on having that extra food and use it almost as a crutch. I would highly recommend switching off the Beast of Burden once you're comfortable enough at a boss, and you'll really start to increase your PvM skills and your damage will increase as well. I know it sounds scary, but pushing yourself is vital for learning and getting better at PvM, and you might just surprise yourself. And stopping using a Beast of Burden is really going to push you out of your comfort zone, and it will improve your PvM skill dramatically. Speaking of other familiars, now we're going to talk about some other very popular summoning familiars for PvM. Now the first one is going to be a Steel Titan. The Steel Titan is a summoning familiar that requires level 99 summoning, and it uses the Steel of Legend scrolls, which allows the Steel Titan to inflict 4 ranged or melee attacks instead of 1. Now this used to be the absolute best familiar for DPS increase in the game. But since the Ripper Demon was released, I wouldn't really recommend using the Steel Titan basically anywhere anymore, as even a Ripper Demon without any scrolls is going to be better than a Steel Titan with scrolls. So mostly you're really never going to use the Steel Titan if you're able to use a Ripper Demon. Now speaking of the Ripper Demon, that's what we are going to talk about next. Now, the Ripper Demon is a familiar that requires level 96 summoning. It will use melee attacks with an occasional chance to hit 2 or 3 times per attack. The Ripper Demon also has a passive effect that increases the damage of player attacks by 0 to 5%, scaling with the percentage of the target's lost life points. This passive effect alone makes the Ripper Demon insanely powerful without even using scrolls, and it will still be more powerful than a Steel Titan with scrolls, like I stated previously, which means it's a no-brainer to use the Ripper Demon even without scrolls. But with scrolls, the Ripper Demon unlocks the Death from Above scroll, which will allow the Ripper Demon to leap up into the air before crashing down and striking the opponent, dealing 200 to 320% damage of their maximum hit. This is by far the absolute best DPS increasing familiar you can use. Anywhere that a boss can take damage from familiars, it's absolutely the best in slot familiar. Places like Araxi or Virago where they can deflect damage or don't take familiar damage, well, the Ripper Demon isn't of much use there, but everywhere else the Ripper Demon is truly king. Even if you are scared, I challenge you to take the Ripper Demon out for a try at a boss you're comfortable with. You will notice a huge DPS increase, and you'll probably get a new personal best kill. If you couple the Ripper Demon with Spiritual Prayer Potions, the damage increase is absolutely insane. Now, the only downside I see with the Ripper Demon is it is fairly expensive if you're using the Death from Above scrolls and you're spamming them with Spiritual Prayer Potions. But like I said before, even without using scrolls, the Ripper Demon is still more powerful than the Steel Titan, so I think it's a no-brainer as the best DPS familiar that you can use. Moving on, we're going to be talking about the Nihil Familiar. Now there's different Nihils for each combat style. The Smoke Nihil will boost your magic accuracy by 5%, the Shadow Nihil boosts your ranged accuracy by 5%, the Blood Nihil boosts your melee accuracy by 5%, and finally, the Ice Nihil will boost your magic accuracy by 5% and also lower your opponent's accuracy and defense. Now these Nihils require level 87 summoning, and they grant this passive effect while they're summoned. They are best for places where you have low accuracy and places that the Ripper Demon isn't able to help you benefit. The biggest example and a common place that Nihils are used are places like Araxor, Nex, and Virago. These are all places that you can't benefit from the Ripper Demon effects and are places that you will commonly have lower accuracy. Nihils last for a whole hour, and the passive effect is really all you need. However, Nihils will also attack at double the speed of all other familiars, meaning that though their max hit is low, they excel in damage overall. As for special attack scrolls, they really aren't worth using. You're mostly using Nihils for the accuracy increase and of course their auto attacks. If you're doing a boss that you can't use a Ripper Demon at, or a boss that can't be attacked by familiars, then Nihil is almost always your best in slot option. So coming in at number 5 is the Illuminated Book of Wisdom. Now, the Book of Wisdom is an illuminated god book that is obtainable after completing the quest One Piercing Note. Now, to create these books, you first need a normal Saradomin's Book of Wisdom, and you must go and craft this at the Abbey in Alcrid. This book will grant +7 to all style bonuses and also has a +4 prayer bonus, making it a decent option if left uncharged. However, charging this book with Saradomin's pages will give you 45 minutes of active time per Saradomin page. The passive effect for this book has a 5% chance when activated for the special attack to activate per hit. When this book activates its special effect, a lightning strike hits the target for 165 to 275% damage, which is a really nice DPS boost. This book boasts a 5.28% DPS increase, and it's based on your hits. So it has a 1 out of 15 chance of proccing per hit. This means it doesn't matter if you're doing low DPS, high DPS, or very little DPS, this book is still going to have the same chance to proc no matter what, which will lead to a very good DPS increase for beginners. The other great thing about this book is its cost. In total, you're going to be looking at spending around 900k GP per hour using this book, which makes it a really good option in terms of costs and DPS, and is honestly a great choice for any beginner PVMer. Coming up next on our list at number 4 is going to be the normal damage Scrimshaws for range and mage. So the Scrimshaw of Cruelty for ranging and the Scrimshaw of Elements for magic. Now, the reason these are above the Illuminated Book of Wisdom is because of how the damage is calculated when you use these. So for the Scrimshaw of Elements and Cruelty, you're looking at a 5% DPS increase, but this is based on your damage. So if you're doing, let's say, 100k damage in a minute, you're going to see a 5k damage increase. If you're doing a 200k damage in a minute, then you will see a 10k damage increase, and so on. The Scrimshaws are better than the Illuminated Book of Wisdom if you have decent DPS. If you're not confident in your DPS, however, I wouldn't recommend using these over the Book of Wisdom. In terms of cost per hour, you're looking at a 2.3 million GP cost per hour, making them more than double the cost of the Book of Wisdom, but a better DPS increase if you're confident in your DPS. For me personally, I use Scrimshaws like these at places like Telos, Rise of the Six, or a higher level PVM where I can justify the cost. And if you're confident in your DPS and have the money, these are honestly a great option. Ranking at number 3 on our list is going to be one of my personal favorite pocket slot items to use, which is the Illuminated Book of Law, which, like the Book of Wisdom, is an illuminated godbook charged with Armadyl pages. Now, this godbook has a passive with a 5% chance per hit to activate, and it will shoot out a tornado that spins at the target's location, dealing 4 hits of damage in 4 ticks for a total of 180% to 300% damage. Using this book, your effective DPS increase is about 5.76%. And it doesn't matter the damage you're dealing, as a special attack is based off your hits and not your damage. In terms of cost, this is around the same price to use as the normal Scrimshaws, looking at around 2.3 to 2.5 million GP per hour using this book. I personally use this book a ton at places like Raksha and Elite Dungeons, and other places too, as it's just a really nice DPS increase and it doesn't cost too much. It's just all around an amazing option whether you're a beginner PVMer or high tier one, so I highly recommend looking into this book. Alright, so now coming in at number 2 is going to be the superior damage Scrimshaws, which include the superior Scrimshaw of Cruelty and the superior Scrimshaw of the Elements. Now, these Scrimshaws are items that can be made in the player-owned port workshop with a level 92 fletching, and you will also need 4 scroll pieces of the Scrimshaw that you're trying to make. You will also need 10 ancient bones to make each Scrimshaw. Now, when equipped, these Scrimshaws give a 6.66 DPS increase, which are notably better than the normal Scrimshaws and the Armadyl book. In terms of cost per hour, these Scrimshaws are untradeable, which of course is the downside, as you'll need to do ports and get these yourself. And you will be using ancient bones to make them, which will make the effective cost around 1.7 to 2 million GP per hour. But if you have these unlocked in ports and have ancient bones, I honestly highly recommend making yourself a bunch of these, as they're really an amazing option for increasing your DPS wherever you go. Alright guys, so finally coming in at number 1 in the best pocket slot items to increase your DPS is the super overpowered Erethdors Grimoire. Now, Erethdors Grimoire is a pocket slot item that is dropped by the boss Solok. This item will require an upfront cost of a whopping 400 million GP to purchase it, and then of course you'll need to charge it as well. What the Grimoire does is it increases your critical strike chance by 12%, which is absolutely massive. It also increases your damage cap from 12k to 15k, meaning that you can hit a maximum of 15k instead of 12k. Which is huge in terms of PVMing, as you'll notice when I PVM and use Bakriminel Bolts, I'm hitting huge 12k hits a ton, which using the Grimoire, this will allow those 12k hits to become 15k hits if available, which is insanely overpowered. Lastly, the Grimoire also gives a +7 style bonus to all styles and a +4 prayer bonus just like the Illuminated Godbooks. In terms of DPS increase, the Grimoire will increase your DPS by about 8%, and that's not including the raised damage cap, which is an absolutely massive DPS increase. However, the cost of using a Grimoire, not even including the 400 mil cost to purchase it, is around 7.8 million GP per hour. Yes, you heard me right, 7.8 mil GP per hour. However, a silver lining is you can use a Grimoire for absolutely free at Solok, which means if you plan on doing a lot of Solok, the Grimoire is a must-have as you won't be paying anything to use it other than the upfront cost. In terms of other places that I personally use a Grimoire or would recommend using the Grimoire, I only really use this at Solok for free, and then I will use it as super high enraged Telos, or if I'm on a long Telos streak, and then I'll also use it if I'm going for record kills or speed kills at very, very high level bosses. I would only recommend the Grimoire if you have a ton of other high level gear and perks, and honestly just have a lot of money you're willing to spend. Or if you're thinking about camping a ton at Solok, it's really good for there, as of course you won't be spending any money on charges. But for me personally, I'll just use the superior Scrimshaws and Illuminated Book of Law almost everywhere, and usually I only whip out the Grimoire for certain scenarios. Alright, so now that we've gone through the top 5 best pocket slot items for DPS increase, I'm going to go through 2 honorable mentions. Now the first is going to be if you're looking for a budget option. The Illuminated Book of Balance is a great option on a budget. It's an effective 4.8 DPS increase and has an AoE effect as its special attack. The best thing though about this option is it's only going to cost you around 175k GP per hour to use, which makes it great if you're doing Slayer or you aren't doing high enough level PVM to justify the higher prices of the other god books or Scrimshaws. Finally, a bit of a weird honorable mention that I thought I would tell you guys about is the Book of Death. The Book of Death is unlocked from Death's Store for 500 Reaper points. You will then need to craft it with a cut Hydrix and Death's Notes, and it will cost you around 84 million GP to craft, and then 8 million GP to recharge fully. However, the passive effect of this book gives it a 1 out of 30 chance per hit to activate, and when this activates, it will instantly kill a monster. Now, this doesn't work on bosses or anything, so don't get too excited. The best place to use this book would be niche scenarios like killing things like rune dragons, gemstone dragons, or high-level slayer creatures with really high-level hit points that you just want to get through the task and kill as fast as possible. But in terms of bossing, it's not really applicable, and the Scrimshaw or Godbook is almost always better. So the first upgrade we're going to be talking about is actually an amulet, and the amulet is the Essence of Finality. Now the Essence of Finality is a degradable amulet that is made by combining an alchemical Hydrix with an Amulet of Souls and a Reaper necklace. This necklace provides a plus 56 damage bonus in all styles, making it a hybrid best in slot amulet. Now the amulet at the moment is going for around 280 mil GP, which makes it cost a decent chunk of change. However, this is an upgrade that will benefit you no matter what style you use, and it will be the best in slot and is a huge upgrade for taking the next step into higher level PVM. The other amazing thing about this amulet is that you can store a special attack in it, and you can use your special attack no matter what weapon you're using. For instance, you can store the Gothic Staff for magic, or the Dark Bow for range, or Dragon Claws for melee. These are all of the super budget options, and they only cost a few 100k. And the nice thing is with these super budget options, you can swap them out whenever you'd like, and you'll only lose a few 100k. Now this is personally what I do. So when I'm doing a bunch of bosses with range, I'll have my Debo in my Essence of Finality. And then if I want to use Mage for something, instead of having to buy a whole new Essence of Finality, I'll just throw a Gothic Staff in there and just buy back my Debo later. Yeah, I'll lose a few 100k, but to me, it's more worth it than buying a whole new Essence of Finality. Now, as stated previously, the best budget special attacks to use are the Gothic Staff for Mage, the Dark Bow for ranged, and the Dragon Claws for melee. I use the Debo spec all the time in my DPS rotation, and it really increases my DPS output a ton. It's the same with magic. I'll spam the Gothic Staff at places like Telos P5 and at the start of different boss fights. The amazing thing about the Essence of Finality is before you would have to switch your Gothic Staff and spec, and you basically get tier 60 damage and accuracy from the Gothic Staff, but now you can Gothic Staff special attack with, say, your tier 90 Noxious Staff, and it will deal the damage of a tier 90 weapon, which is just absolutely amazing. Not to mention that you also get the effects of the Reaper Amulet and Amulet of Souls in one amulet. And you also get the best in slot style bonuses, so the EOF is just a no-brainer for beginners that are looking to transition to higher level PVM like Rax, Nex, and Telos. And it is honestly such a good upgrade if you have the funds available. Alright, so the next thing we're going to look at are the tier 80 boots for each style. Now this is the Fleeting boots and the Blast Diffusion boots specifically. We're not going to be talking about the Laceration boots because they're just not as good as these boots. So the Blast Diffusion boots and Fleeting boots are no-brainers if you mage or range and are super good for the price. So first off, Fleeting boots are tier 80 ranged power boots, and they have a special effect that will provide you the ability to move while using the rapid fire ability. They'll also give you a 10% increased hit chance while the ability is active. So this is absolutely amazing as your rapid fire will never get interrupted, and it allows for a ton of extra movement and versatility while still outputting a ton of DPS when ranging. The great thing about these boots is they're only 40 million GP, and if you want, for an extra 100 million GP, you can buy a Shadow Spike, which is used to upgrade these boots further to tier 90 boots with the same effect. If you don't have these and you use range, I would highly recommend stop what you're doing and making these one of the first upgrades you buy. Now that I've used the Fleeting boots, I can honestly never go back to range DPSing without them. Alright, so secondly, we are going to look at the tier 80 magic boots, the Blast Diffusion boots. Now these are also tier 80 magic power boots, just like the Fleeting boots, and they have a special effect that shortens the charge time on the detonate magic threshold. Now this means that detonate will fully charge 33.3% faster than normal. This allows for an ability like Detonate to be used as a really good threshold in magic rotations, just like Asphyxiate and Wild Magic. So if you're maging, these boots are a must-have to increase your DPS. And the best part, they only cost 4.8 million GP. That's cheaper than Virtus boots, which these offer the same style bonus as. With the increased detonate charge rate as well, these are just a no-brainer. If you're maging at all, whether you have tier 70 weapons or tier 92 weapons, Blast Diffusion boots are a must-get upgrade, and I would personally just buy them right away. Alright, so now we're going to move on to a common mistake I see people doing is upgrading from their tier 90 or even their tier 80 armor to the best of the best tier 92 power armor. Now at first, this may seem like a no-brainer. The rush to get to tier 92 Elite Serenic or Tectonic, as this is the best possible armor you can get in terms of DPS, and that allure of having the absolutely best in slot armor can be strong. But don't be fooled. While tier 92 armor is really good, and of course it is the best in slot armor, It is not that huge of a difference or upgrade versus tier 90 armor, and it's actually really marginal. So the actual DPS increase of tier 90 armor, such as Tectonic, to tier 92 armor is only a 0.8 DPS increase, which is way lower than you may have expected. Considering the fact that for ranged, it's going to cost you almost 800 million GP to upgrade to Elite Serenic, and from Mage, it will cost you over 300 mil to upgrade to Elite Tectonic. So upgrading to tier 92 armor is usually one of the last upgrades you'll want to get, and you'll only want to get it once you have almost every other core upgrade and you're just trying to maximize as much as possible. So I know, guys, that it can be tempting to be like, oh, you know, I have Pernix, or I have, you know, Serenic, and I really just want to go and spend all the money and upgrade to the best in slot armor, but realize that the difference that this is going to make in your DPS is going to be very marginal. That's why I recommend it being one of the last upgrades you get when you just have so much cash to throw around and you just want to get the little bit of extra damage. But you can get a lot more notable upgrades for your DPS than upgrading to tier 92 armor. So the first upgrade we're going to get into is the Limitless Sigil. Now this is an item that is made by combining 2,000 Vital Sparks together, and it unlocks the Limitless ability. What this ability does is when activated, the player is able to use threshold abilities without needing to have 50% adrenaline for 6 seconds. This has a 90-second cooldown. This ability is super good and will increase your DPS almost everywhere, as you can constantly use it with no charge once unlocked. This is great for bosses like Solok, Telos, and Virago that require big damage checks. Things like Ambassador as well, and basically anywhere that you go, this sigil will give you an advantage. Okay, so next we're going to be looking at two staffs, the Inquisitor staff and the Staff of Sliske. Now at first glance, the Staff of Sliske is much more expensive, sitting at 800 million GP, and is a tier 92 weapon. You would assume if you're looking to upgrade your magic setup from something like a Noxious Staff or below, you would go with the Staff of Sliske. But if we look at something like the Inquisitor staff, sitting much cheaper at 330 mil, it's a tier 80 magic weapon at first glance. But the thing that makes the Inquisitor staff different is it will turn into a tier 97 staff against melee class bosses, which is absolutely insanely overpowered and much better than the tier 92 staff of Sliske. And the bosses this work on are most notably Solok, Telos, Next Angel of Death, Helwyr, Vindicta, all 3 God Wars bosses except Kwuarm, KBD, QBD, Giant Mole, and a bunch more. Now, this is going to bring me into another point about increasing your DPS, which is to upgrade based on what bosses you do. If you never do Telos, or Solok, or Vindicta, or Helwyr, Inquisitor staff probably isn't the best choice, being as it's only good for a certain type of boss. But if you're someone who does a lot or all the bosses I just mentioned, the Inquisitor staff is a great choice. And you can always use the Inquisitor staff at all these bosses and then keep using your Noxious staff for bosses that the Inquisitor doesn't work on. It's a much better way to spend your money than buying the Staff of Sliske, in my opinion. If you buy the Inquisitor staff and keep your Noxious staff, or buy both, that's about 450 mil. You can use the Inquisitor staff to get a huge damage boost at all the bosses it works on, and then you can use your Noxious staff at all other bosses that the Inquisitor will not work on, and you won't really be missing out on a ton by not having the Staff of Sliske. I believe this is a must-have weapon for any PVMers that are using magic and getting into group bosses, or want to start things like Telos, Solok, stuff like that. And I mean, it's good at a lot of other places like God Wars 1 and God Wars 2, so I think it's an all-around great choice. Alright. Finally, as the last upgrade, we are going to be talking about Archaeology relics. Now obviously you are going to need to have Archaeology leveled up a bit, And for these relics, there are two that make up the best DPS increase possible. The first being the Berserker's Fury Archaeology relic, which only requires level 56 Archaeology, and once harnessed, players will deal up to 5.5% increased damage with all styles the lower the player's current life points are. This is really good because even if you don't keep your hit points super low, you aren't usually going to be on full health when bossing, and this relic will give you a continuous passive DPS boost. You'll need to combine a lock of hair with an amulet of the Forsaken, which will run you about 50 mil or so GP, but for such a low requirement and not too expensive of a cost, this is a great upgrade to get right away to passively increase your DPS. The next part of the best in-slot DPS relic combination is the Fury of the Small relic, which lets all adrenaline generating basics generate 1% extra adrenaline. This is amazing and adds up so much when PVMing, as you'll be gaining adrenaline at a faster rate, which will in turn increase your DPS. Of course, this one has a bit of steeper requirements, requiring level 97 Archaeology, but it is pretty cheap and won't cost you much at all. I highly recommend, if anything, getting 56 Archaeology and getting the Berserker's Fury relic, as it's so nice to stack passive DPS boosts, and all these boosts like perks and Archaeology relics will add up so much, and you'll be dealing so much DPS without even trying. Right, so the first item that we're going to be talking about in today's video is one that I didn't even know existed before I researched for this video, and boy did this item blow my mind. So this item is the Spirit Cape, which is a reward from Dungeoneering. Now the Spirit Cape costs 45,000 Dungeoneering tokens, and it requires level 50 defense, summoning, and Dungeoneering to equip. Now after you purchase the cape, it will grant you a passive effect, which this is huge. A passive effect which I had no clue about, and I really had to go and buy this for myself. Now the passive effect that this cape grants is it makes special move cost for all summoning familiars permanently reduced by 20%. Now this is amazing for people using something like a Ripper Demon, as without using spiritual prayer potions, you will deal more DPS before your Ripper Demon runs out of special attack. And if you're somebody that uses spiritual prayer potions a lot, you will save a good amount of money on them, as your special attack scrolls will cost less percentage to use. Now this is honestly a no-brainer. It's cheap in terms of Dungeoneering tokens, it has little to no requirements, and it unlocks a passive effect. So you can just shove the cape in your bank or cape rack in your house and just forget about it and enjoy the nice passive effect. I would absolutely get this as soon as possible if you have the Dungeoneering tokens and levels available. So next we're going to look at the Asylums Surgeon's Ring. Now the Asylum Surgeon's Ring is a reward from completing the Broken Home quest in under 37 minutes after the initial completion of the quest, as well as all the other challenges beforehand. Now you will also need level 85 defense to wear this ring. I'll link in the description more details on how you specifically get this ring, and what this ring does is it does grant you 10% chance to prevent adrenaline loss when using threshold abilities, and also a 40% chance of saving 25% of a special attack's original cost. The ring also has plus 21 to all style bonuses, making it an all-around great option and really cheap, essentially free. It's essentially better than the Ring of Death if you don't care about death costs, as its style bonus is only a little bit lower than the Ring of Death, and the special effect makes it more than worth it to use. Now I recommend the Asylum Surgeon's Ring to any PVMer that doesn't have a Ring of Death or doesn't primarily camp their Ring of Death, as this is absolutely free if you just do the quests and the challenges, and it's just all around a great item to use for PVM. So next on our list is going to be something that I've preached throughout a lot of my videos, but it is the Berserker auras. Now I'm talking about Reckless, Maniacal, and Berserker. These auras are absolutely free and they can be unlocked from War's Wares in War's Retreat for 25,000 Marks of War each. Of course, you need to gain these Marks of War by bossing first, but once you have them, these should be absolutely the first things you buy. These auras are super overpowered and are well worth using at almost all PvM. I basically use Berserker auras at basically every PvM scenario I go to, except maybe the lower level bosses. What they do is they boost your attack, strength, magic, or range levels by 10%, and they reduce your defense by 15%. Now, while you take a little bit more damage, the DPS and accuracy increase is super overpowered and well worth it. If you're planning on doing any high level PvM or even mid level PvM, these auras are a must get. I cannot stress that enough. You don't know how many people I see doing high level PvM or mid level PvM with just the worst auras, while these are super overpowered. I will leave a link in the description if you want to read more about them as well. The next item we're going to be talking about is the Fight Kiln Capes. Now these are capes gotten from beating the Fight Kiln. There's one for melee, magic, and ranged. Now, like I said, these require the completion of the Fight Kiln, and now while many people are scared of doing the Fight Kiln, it's definitely not as hard as it looks, and I will link a guide in the description if you guys want to go do it. Now, these capes are rewards for completing a run and are given out depending on what style you use. Now, these capes are the best in slot cape bonuses in the entire game, and they're absolutely free. It's not often that you can get a best in slot gear upgrade without having to shell out tons of GP. So if you're someone looking to make some upgrades for cheap, doing the Fight Kiln and getting all these capes for all your styles is going to be an absolutely huge upgrade for almost no cost except the supplies you use doing the kiln, which won't be that much. Now these capes all offer a 33.5 style bonus in each style, making them, like I said before, best in slot. I highly recommend to anyone who doesn't have these for all their styles to go knock them out, and then you can cross off a best in slot upgrade off your list for absolutely free. Now we're going to be looking at the Ring of Vigour. Now the Ring of Vigour is a Dungeoneering item that costs 50,000 Dungeoneering tokens, and it requires level 60 to attack and Dungeoneering. Now, when a Ring of Vigour is worn, it makes it so that when an ultimate ability is used, adrenaline will be reduced by 90% instead of 100%. And when a weapon special attack is used, it only requires 90% of the normally required adrenaline or special attack energy. This is a ring that I bring with me absolutely everywhere, and you should too. It's great for switching to when you use an ultimate ability like Sunshine, Berserk, or Death Swiftness, as it saves you an extra 10% adrenaline, thus increasing your DPS. And it also is great to equip when using special attacks, it will make them cost less as well. Not to mention that the stats are not too bad, sitting at plus 12 to each combat style. And it doesn't cost too much Dungeoneering tokens to get either. This is a staple item to absolutely every PvM preset that I have. I don't think there is a single boss that I don't take this ring to, so safe to say it is an amazing upgrade to get for no GP cost. Now finally, we are coming to our last upgrade, and this upgrade is more of an honorable mention as it will be quite tough for some people to get, but it's as free as it gets and it's a passive upgrade. And that upgrade is the Reaper Crew upgrade. Now basically, the Reaper Crew is an achievement that requires the player to kill every boss in RuneScape once. Now once you unlock this, you get a permanent passive unlock, plus 2 prayer bonus, plus 20 armor, plus 200 life points, plus 12 melee, ranged, and magic damages bonus, which is really good as it doesn't require you to wear any item, and it's just a passive effect. Now, while this upgrade is hard, I know a lot of you maybe only have a few bosses left that you need to kill before you get this achievement and upgrade, which is why I wanted to mention it to encourage you to make it a goal. It doesn't mean you have to kill every boss yourself, as it will count if you do bosses in groups, masses, and of course solo. While this is hard to get, like I said, it's essentially no cost, which is why I thought I'd mention it here at the end of the video. Alright guys, to start us off here, I'm going to be talking about why you should switch from Revolution to full manual. So I'll show you what Revolution does first. So basically what it will do is I can just click on a target, and it'll use my abilities for me. I'm not pressing any abilities here. It is just using the next ability in the first ability that it can use. So basically, Sonic Wave is my first ability. So that means whenever Sonic Wave is not on cooldown, it will use it, and vice versa. So it will basically do this, and it will use these in a certain order. And then you can set it so it can use thresholds, or you can use them yourself. I know a lot of people use thresholds themselves. So basically, the reason that Revolution is not good is because you don't have full control over your abilities, and you also will not be using the right abilities all the time. So in some scenarios, it will use Sonic Wave when I have other abilities that could be used, in a better scenario, because it will always go back to Sonic Wave whenever it's, on cooldown. So having full control over your abilities, especially for bosses where you need to use mechanics. I don't know how many times that I've been at like Telos when I used to use Revolution, and I would want to use a different ability, like let's say, I don't know, Anticipate, and I would click it, but Revolution would already have used an ability, so I wouldn't be able to, I'd have to time my Anticipate with my Revolution basically. So that's just some of the reasons why Revolution isn't that great. Another thing that you can do, we're going to switch back to full manual here, is with full manual, like I said, you get all the controls over what abilities you use. So, at some places, using Impact and Rack together is very good. Like at Telos, you can stun him with Impact, and then Rack will deal much more damage. Same with Deep Impact. But some bosses you can't stun, so Deep Impact and Rack are very, very bad, but Revolution will use them anyway. So having full control is one of the main benefits of full manual. Another thing you can do is auto attacks are way easier. So basically, I can use an auto attack and then use an ability right after. You have to 4-tick, I'm pretty sure, with full manual. So if you ever want to 4-tick, which is more advanced than probably if you're on Revolution, which you're thinking about doing anytime soon, but you can also only do that with full manual. Full manual just gives you all the control over your ability rotations and will really dramatically increase your DPS. And once you get used to it, it makes the game more engaging, more fun, and you'll literally you'll be so happy you switched. You really will. I'm so happy I switched. I don't know, if I could ever go back to Revolution. I'm just so used to my keybinds now. It's just muscle memory, and my DPS has improved dramatically. I used to get 10, 12-minute Telos kills. Now I get 5-minute Telos kills. So obviously some of that is gear and experience, but a lot of it has to do with me switching to full manual. So those are just some of the reasons why you should switch. And now I'm going to kind of show you, the best ways to kind of, ease your transition into learning full manual. All right, guys. So a way to ease yourself into using full manual from Revolution is to basically go to a boss, and the bosses I'll actually recommend you try this at. I'd recommend when you first make the full switch to full manual to go to something like God Wars 1. But to ease yourself into that, we're not going to switch to full manual right away. First, what we're going to do is you're going to go to a boss that you're comfortable with. Maybe it's Hellweir, maybe it's Vindicta. A boss that you'll have a decent amount of time to use abilities, and maybe you'll use some defensives. So what you'll do is you'll go to the boss and you'll have on Revolution. But what I want you to do is, instead of using Revolution and relying on it, I want you to try to click as many of your abilities as you can. So right now I'm inputting my abilities, and then if you have to do something, I don't know, like eat food, you can let Revolution go off like I am right now, and it'll kind of be a crutch to carry you, but you won't be using it the whole time. And then once you eat your food, you'll go back to full manual, and you'll try to click all your abilities that you can. And of course, if you mess up, Revolution will be the crutch that will, use abilities for you. So it's not like you're going to be, if you mess up, you're going to use no abilities, which I think is something a lot of people fear, that it's just going to go horribly wrong. But if you just try as hard as you can and do this for a few hours and just get used to pressing your abilities. And it's not like you're going to die or fail the boss, because you're going to have Revolution there as a crutch, but try not to rely on it too much. Every now and then if it uses an ability, that's fine, but try your best to get used to your keybinds and, use your abilities manually. So this is the first thing I recommend doing. A lot of you that use Revolution might already click a ton of your abilities. You might click 80% of your abilities. So what I recommend is trying to click 90% of your abilities with your keybinds, and just let Revolution go off as little as possible. This will make the transition into using full manual so much easier. So this is the first thing that I'll recommend you guys to do. Alright guys, so the last thing you're going to do after you've used Revolution and you've gotten used to manually inputting most of your abilities, you're going to make the switch to full manual. So basically, to do this, you just go to the settings and you go to full manual. Now this may seem intimidating, but trust me, you're going to get used to it. So now that you've made the switch, you'll basically have to input all your abilities, and you won't have the crutch of Revolution, but do not fear. After practicing manually inputting your abilities with Revolution, you should be used to it a lot. So you should have a lot of familiarity with your keybinds, and now you can finally start to use full manual. And once you learn full manual and you're used to it, that's when you can start improving and, wisely picking your ability rotations. And I plan on making an ability rotation video, at least for Magic, so you can look out for that as well. But now that you're on full manual, the places I would recommend to start using full manual, the number one place that helped me was the Magister. Now, I know a lot of people aren't going to have the requirements for the Magister, because I believe it actually has a high Slayer requirement. So I've actually done a ton of Magister. Magister is basically a DPS dummy, so I would definitely recommend going here, because it's a lot. You can just practice a lot of your ability rotations. There's very little defensives you have to use. You don't really have to use like any defensives when you go to the Magister. So if you can do the Magister, I personally like it because it really allowed me to just do the same rotation over and over and over again. And it's, a nice spot to manually use your abilities. Now, again, another place I would recommend when you're just starting out is God Wars 1, because like the Magister, those are basically DPS dummies. You're really not going to be taking any damage. The only thing you have to focus on is manually inputting your abilities. So something like General Graardor, he's really not going to hurt you that much, 10-second kills. So you can just focus on using your abilities. The kills are so short, though, so you're not really challenging yourself that much, and you're not really having to keep up your abilities. So I would recommend something like Hellweir, where the kills are a little bit longer. There may be some defensives you're going to have to use, but it's not like Telos or anything like that. So you can go there, and you can basically use your abilities and get more used to using full manual, because, like I said, to ease into it, you'll want to use Revolution and manually input your abilities, but, there's no really great way other than actually diving into it. So you're eventually going to have to make that switch, and you're going to have to just go for it and practice. You may not do good at first. You may find times when you're forgetting what button to press. In that case, maybe you should change your keybinds, or your buttons aren't close enough together. You should maybe change your keybinds. But honestly, practice and muscle memory is going to take over after a while. You can't just do it for a few hours and not do that great and then switch back. You need to keep at it, and eventually it will just be like nothing else. It'll be very, very easy. I basically don't have to look at my keyboard at all. I barely have to look at my ability bar, and basically I can just know what abilities are up, what's not up. I know the timing for all of them, so I can get the optimal rotation in, depending on the boss, of course. And this will, dramatically just increase your DPS, because you can choose what ability you want to use. And I'll actually put in the description which basics are the best abilities in priority, so you know which ones you should be using a lot of, which ones you should kind of use as a last resort, and stuff like that. So yeah, I would definitely want to encourage you guys to not give up and just keep practicing, and eventually you'll get it down. And I hope this video has helped some of you out with learning full manual. I definitely would recommend Hellware, God Wars 1, and the the Magister as your boss to start learning on. Once you, of course, get used to it, I would definitely recommend you challenge yourself with harder bosses, because that's the only way you're going to improve and get better. The first thing, and one of the most important things that I noticed, is people not using or even having unlocked the Death Swiftness or Sunshine ultimate abilities. Now, let me be honest, these abilities are king. They are the meta in bossing. Sunshine and Death Swiftness are ultimate abilities for ranged and magic, and they're unlocked by completing the World Wakes quest. What these abilities do is they increase the user's ranged or mage damage by 50% while active. Yes, you heard me, 50%. Now, these abilities last for 30 seconds, but they can be further increased to 38 seconds with the Planted Feet perk. Putting it simply, Death Swiftness and Sunshine are must-have for anyone using ranged or melee. It should be the core of your DPS rotation that you use every time you're basically, killing a boss or dealing out DPS multiple times a boss. And you'd be surprised how many people do high level or medium level bosses and don't even have these abilities unlocked. My friend didn't have this ability at all and was doing Araxor for the first time without it, and he noticed a huge difference in kill speeds after he unlocked the Death Swiftness ability and started using it at Araxor. Guys, if you don't have these abilities and you range your mage, stop what you're doing right now and go complete the World Wakes quest. I promise you, these abilities are well worth it, and they're honestly the meta. They're the core to your rotations if you're either ranging or maging, and they will honestly change your life if you don't have them. This method goes for fighting bosses that are susceptible to poison damage. Now, not all bosses can take poison damage, but you can look on the Runescape wiki and see if a boss is immune or susceptible to poison damage. If a boss or monster can take poison damage, there's a few things that you can do to massively increase your DPS on that boss. Now, the first and most important thing is drinking weapon poison. The strongest being the Weapon Poison +++. Now, applying this potion will give you a 12.5% chance per hit to poison your opponent in combat. Now, this will appear as a buff on your buff bar and will last 12 minutes. It will deal 13 to 42% ability damage per poison hit. This is an absolutely massive DPS increase for pretty much free. You don't need to input anything at all. It's super passive. All you have to do is drink this potion, and if the boss you're fighting is able to be poisoned, it will deal massive passive DPS. Now, another thing you can do is you can couple this with the Cinderbane Gloves, and this makes the base poison damage increase go from 200 to 250 damage, and the poison will process and poison more often than usual. Cinderbane Gloves are insanely OP, and they are by far the best slot gloves you can use at any boss that is able to be poisoned. Finally, you can couple your weapon poison and your Cinderbane Gloves with the Kwuarm Incense Sticks. Now the Kwuarm Incense Sticks make it so each potency level of the incense will provide a 2.5% weapon poison damage increase. The potency will have a maximum of 4 for a 10% poison damage increase. Now this effect does stack with the base poison damage from weapon poison and Cinderbane Gloves. So using these 3 poison boosting buffs and gear will drastically increase your DPS at any boss that is poisonable, and even if you don't have the money for Cinderbane Gloves because they're fairly expensive at about 100 mil, using weapon poison is pretty cheap per hour, and all you have to do is drink it and you'll get passive DPS. Let's get into the guide on Bakriminel Bolts and how, why, which ones you should use, and where you should use them. So first we're going to start out by talking about what are Bakriminel Bolts. Well, Bakriminel Bolts are bolts that are fletched from a bloodwood tree, and they require level 80 range to use. Now keep in mind these can only be used with crossbows, so you can't use these with longbows or anything else. They can be tipped with a variety of different gemstone tips and then also enchanted to provide a bunch of different effects in combat. In short, Bakriminel Bolts are what make crossbows so powerful compared to the bow because of the versatility of the different bolts you can use, and they're honestly a must-have for PvMing with ranged. Alright, so firstly, we are going to look at the most popular Bakriminel Bolt and one of the most powerful, which is the Ruby Bakriminel Bolts Enchanted. Now I often get asked in my videos, how do I manage to hit so many 10Ks or 12K max hits, and honestly the reason, putting it simply, is the Ruby Bakriminel Bolts E. So the Ruby Bakriminel Bolts have a special effect called the Blood Forfeit effect. Now this has a 5% chance to trigger, and what this effect does is it will drain the target for up to 20% of their remaining life points, while dealing the player 10% of their own life points as recoil. But guys, don't pay too much attention to the damaging effect on you, because when you're soul splitting or PvMing, you will honestly barely notice it. So as you can tell by this effect, these bolts are extremely powerful, and you can couple these bolts with the Elite Seer's Diary achievements for an increase in the bolt proccing chance, and then the ranged cape also offers an increase in Bakriminel Bolt special effect chance. So basically for all the bolts that I talk about in this video, you can do the Elite Seer's Diary and get the ranged 99 cape perk, and those will all massively increase how often your bolts proc and will just increase your DPS in general. So back to the Ruby bolts, they are amazing for pretty much every boss fight with high HP. I use them almost everywhere, and you'll be hitting tons of 10Ks and 12Ks. However, once a boss gets below a certain HP, these bolts will stop being as effective. So that is why most people bring a bolt switch for after their boss is at lower HP, which will bring us into the next Bakriminel Bolt I'm going to talk about, which is the Hydrix Bakriminel Bolts. Now, the Hydrix Bakriminel Bolts are by far the most expensive Bakriminel Bolt, but they're probably the most overpowered. So these bolts are tipped with Hydrix and cost a steep 35k each bolt. However, the special effect is called the Death Mark effect, and it will instantly grant the player 10% adrenaline and an additional 1% from basic abilities for 15 seconds. Subsequent activations while under the effect of Death Mark will refresh this effect. So abilities like Rapid Fire also have a chance to trigger this effect and gain you adrenaline on every single hit of Rapid Fire, and it's the same with Greater Ricochet. Now, the reason that these bolts are so overpowered is for instances when you need to do more damage and you need more adrenaline, so like DPS checks. So for instance, a place where I love to use these is at the crystals at Seer. Basically, what I'll do is when I run out of adrenaline, I'll throw on the Hydrix bolt tips and use greater ricochet. And I kid you not, I have gone from 15% adrenaline to 80% adrenaline before in one basic ability. It's honestly that OP. Now, you won't gain that much adrenaline every time, but if you use Hydrix bolt tips with things like greater ricochet or rapid fire, they can just gain you so much adrenaline and can be used to spam more threshold abilities or spam debo specs, which is just absolutely amazing for DPS. Of course, we have the downside of them costing so much, but in certain bosses and certain scenarios, they're honestly well worth the price. Alright, so next we're going to be moving on to a more popular Bakriminel bolt to use as a switch from your ruby bolts instead of Hydrix, and that is the Dragonstone Bakriminel Bolts E. Now, these are on the cheaper end, and they have a special effect called Dragon's Breath. Dragon's Breath will hit the target a second time for 25% of your current attack as Dragonfire. Keep in mind that fighting dragons, they will be immune to this attack, but it can hit everything else. So these bolts are very basic, but are really good as an all-around type of Bakriminel bolt to use. They're good for lower or mid-level boss scenarios or places that you don't feel comfortable using the Ruby and Hydrix combo and just want a cheaper option. They will still give you a really nice damage output, and I personally use them at lots of mid-tier bosses myself. So next on our list is the Onyx Bakriminel Bolts E. Now, these bolts have a special effect called Life Leech, which deals 25% more damage and also heals the player for 25% of the damage potential of the attack, capping at 2,500 life points. The nice thing about Onyx bolts and the places that I personally use them are places that I'm more concerned about conserving food than damage. So for instance, you can have a chill time at a place like the Magister using these bolts, as you'll be healing a ton with these and also with Soul Split, and you'll probably not have to eat much at all. These are also nice because they work with the Onslaught ability as well, and you can always bring these to places that use Onslaught like Araxor, and if you use Onslaught on the last phase of Araxor, this can help keep your health higher and you can maybe do more Onslaught hits and damage. Now, these cost in the upper end at about 11k each and are pretty decent, although they are kind of niche. Alright, so finally, the last Bakriminel bolt that I'm going to talk about that I feel like is worth using in PvM are the Diamond Bakriminel Bolts E. Now, these bolts are also on the cheaper end like Dragonstone, and they have a special effect called Armor Pierce, which will deal 15% more damage to the target with perfect accuracy. This means these are great for bosses that have lower accuracy, and that's the only place I would really use them. So you would want to use these at places that you have lower accuracy against the boss. So maybe if you don't have a good aura up or you're fighting a really tanky boss, these are a pretty good cheap option to use for the price, but they're probably the least used out of the list we talked about today.